This is A Geek Leader. Hey, Geek Leaders, welcome to episode 122 of A Geek Leader podcast. And today on the show is me. I'm just going to have a solo show today. And I talked about this a while back that I wanted to do a solo show probably like every month or every quarter to kind of go through an idea or something I've been working on or some thoughts that I've been writing or coming up with and talk about it. And I figured what better time to do that than now. I haven't done one of these in quite some time. I've had a lot of guests on, a lot of great guests. I've got a lot of great guests lined up coming on in future episodes as well. But today is going to be just me. So if you don't like hearing me talk, well, you might want to delete this or fast forward or move ahead. But if you do, that's great because we're going to talk about building better teams. And this talk is not about recruiting or hiring. Although those things are important, that's not what this is about. And it's not really about management per se. It's more about leadership and culture and just team building in general. So I want to talk about building. And if you've ever built a new house, we went through the process of building the house that we're in now. And they do things in a certain order when you're building a house. You usually start with the foundation. You've got to get that foundation in place before we can move ahead. And whether it's a brick foundation or a slab foundation, you have crawl space or whatever it is, but you have to get that foundation in place. And then after that, they start building the exterior because you want to get it what they call dry. You want to make sure that it's completely weatherproof before you move on to the interior. So the exterior goes up next. You have that foundation, then the exterior, and then your interior pieces. So you build your interior walls, then you do the flooring and the drywall, get all the interior done, and then you get into refinements. Like you put that whatever the features that you pick out, whether it's the type of floors, the type of carpet, the paint, you get your refinements done. So you have your foundation, your exterior, your interior, and then your refinements. And that's kind of the basics of building a house or a building or structure that way. And building a team goes through those same steps. And I try to be simple when I put together these steps so that I could have the same steps. But I found that building a team goes in a different order. Building a team, first you start with the foundation. You get your layers in order, but then you work on your inside, your interior, and then your refinements, and then your exterior. You put those together and you look down, it spells the word fire. And I'm using the word fire here to kind of illustrate how to instill a fire in your team to build that great team. So I'm going to go through what each one of these things mean, the foundation, the interior, the refinements, and the exterior, and how as a leader of a team or in leadership we're going to go through putting these things together. Okay, starting out with foundation. First off, you want to have a strong leadership presence in place and realize that you have to pull your team along. You can't push. It's like pushing a rope. It's not necessarily an easy thing or something simple to do. So one of the ways that you build that foundation is you set up your cultural norms. You set up an environment of success or a way that your team thinks about being part of a team. And for my team, I use the code. So this is our IT department code. And I'm going to share these items with you just so you know what I'm talking about and kind of an example of what these items are. So the first one is to act like an owner. Act like you own this company. Pretend like you are the one who his livelihood depends on the success or failure of the business in general. Act like an entrepreneur. That's kind of the same thing. All right. Next up is we have each other's back. In IT, people view technology departments as the department, not as individuals within that department. They don't even know the difference between, let's say, an application administrator and a database developer or a SQL engineer or versus a Active Directory Windows Server or a network engineer or a cybersecurity person or a help desk person. They don't know the difference between these roles for the most part. So they see everybody as being the same. If they give a request that should go to your somebody on your IT infrastructure team, but it goes to your help desk, they don't care. They don't know. They don't know the difference. So have each other's back. Don't ever throw anybody on the bus. Don't ever say it was that team's fault or that person's fault. We all accept blame together. We take requests together. We are a team. We fail together. We succeed together. It's IT. So have each other's back. All right, the next one I have is we choose people over process. And this is kind of a Scrum thing where they talk about the ideas that you always choose people over your process. The same thing is true. If we have a policy that affects a person individually, we need to look at that on a case-by-case basis. Yes, we want to adhere to our policies, the most we can, but understand that there could be exceptions, and exceptions sometimes define the rule. So therefore, we always choose people over process. We always realize that the person may have a different perspective, maybe coming from a different place, and may have a different experience that they're dealing with when they're going through the situation. So choose people over process. The process is not there to shut people down. It's there to build a better team. It's kind of like bumpers. I like to think of policies and procedures kind of like bumpers on a bowling. You ever go bowling, you set up those bumpers, and that they're not there to lower the score. They're there to keep the ball in play. They're there to increase the score, to make things more efficient, to keep us within our boundaries so that we can improve upon and do better overall. So choose people over process. Next up is we question our assumptions. And this idea is that things are not always as they seem. Don't always do things because we've always done it that way. Question the assumption. Question why we do things. Why did we do this last year? Why are we doing it next year? What's the purpose behind this? There's got to be a reason why we chose this. What is that reason? Don't just assume that the decision that we made 2 years ago or 3 years ago is the correct decision today. Let's question that. Let's question the assumption we had behind it. Don't just say, oh, well, so-and-so thinks this. Well, how do you know? Have you asked them? Have you talked about them? Maybe their opinion changed. Maybe 2 years ago they didn't want to go to a certain type of system because of X, Y, and Z, but those things may have changed over the past 2 years. One example that I can look back on, many years ago, we had an executive that wanted to hold on to his BlackBerry even though everybody else was going to iPhones. And he's like, oh, I like this BlackBerry. I cannot switch. So because of that, we had to keep a BlackBerry Enterprise server, for all you people that have worked in technology for decades like me, BlackBerry Enterprise server up and running for one user so that this user could get emails and such on his BlackBerry because he didn't want to switch over to the iPhone. Well, nowadays, look at that user. He has the latest and greatest iPhone. He wants the latest and greatest ones. He wants the 11 that just came out. Because we have to question our assumption. We can't always go back to the fact that he wants to keep the old things because that's what he did at one point. Things change, and we always need to question those assumptions. All right. Next up, we think big and start small. Always plan big and think big. Think about this is kind of going back to Stephen Covey's habits of the 7 habits, but he has one that says, start with the end in mind. I take that and switch it up a little bit. Think about the end in mind. Think big, but not necessarily the end, because with software and most things in technology, the process never ends. Getting to the end is actually a mirage. It's going to be continuously improving. So think big, but also start with the smallest thing that you can do to get to that big step at the end. Next up I have is we don't create waves, we ride them. And the idea is here, we don't want to be a drama center. We don't want to be creating drama. And if there is drama, let's not react to it. Let's just kind of go with the flow, move forward, and get past it. All right? Next up is we're intentional about our work. Let's not do things just for the sake of doing them. Let's not run reports because we've always ran this report. Let's figure out the reasons why, and let's be intentional about the things that we do. One of the things that I found in different roles that I've served in is that many times we do things because we assume people look at the work that we do. And when we break it down and we realize that some of the things that we do it for no reason whatsoever, we can recoup a lot of our time and our energy and our efforts and put them to things that really are important. A lot of things we work on is busy work. It's not really important. And Tim Ferriss had a quote that says, busyness is another form of laziness. And people get busy because they don't want to actually go into the point and saying, do I really need to do this, and cut that out of their life. They just said, I'll just be busy because it's easier than actually try to figure out whether this is important or not. So be intentional about our work. Next up is we fail fast and recover faster. This is kind of an entrepreneurial mindset. Also, in software development, a lot of people say that we break things, but we want to be able to recover faster. So even if we are going to fail fast, before we get there, we have to have a fallback plan. We have to have a way we can recover faster. So we have to have a way to fail fast and recover faster. And next up is probably one of my favorites, and that is that we are not experts. We keep the posture of a student always learning. We kind of came up with this idea that we want to keep that idea of being a student and realize that we're never experts because everything is changing. And once we think we know it all, we're behind. And one of my first leadership books that I read was Notes to a Software Team Lead. And that was when I first became a manager of software developers. And someone pointed out that book, so I read it. And in there, there's a quote that just says, we are not. There are no experts here. There's only us. And I kept thinking that, we're not experts because some of this stuff has never been done before. When I look at the people that I was hiring, and at the time I was trying to hire mobile developers, and this is in 2010, and our HR department said, well, make sure you put in there that they have at least 5 years of experience because if you want like a mid-level mobile developer. And I said, well, there hasn't been mobile development for 5 years. There's not going to be people with 5 years of experience of mobile development because it doesn't exist. And it was kind of hard to find those people, but we had to realize that we aren't experts. We're always learning, and we're going to continue to learn. Anytime you want to have a good technology person, they've got to have that posture of a student, always learning. So again, that one is, we are not experts. We will keep a posture of a student, always learning. The next one is, we make the complex seem simple. And here I want to always be, whenever we're talking to people outside of our groups or in business roles, don't try to be overly complex. And a lot of people in technology fall into this idea that they have to use acronyms, they have to use these buzzwords. Let's not do that. Let's just talk in a way that people understand us. And even if it means we dumb things down a little bit, we do that because we want to make sure the complex seems simple. We always want to have that mindset and that appearance that this was easy for us. Even if it's not always easy for us, we want to make it seem that way so that people aren't afraid to ask. They're not afraid to get our help when they need our help. So we make the complex seem simple. And the last one I have is, we are here to serve, not be served. We are here to serve, not be served. In technology, most companies, technology is a cost center. In other companies where they actually write software, it can be an asset builder where it generates revenues. But either way, we're here to serve. We're here to serve either our customers or our business partners. We're here to serve somebody. And we need to keep that in mindset that we aren't egotistical. We're not here for the other people to worship us or to serve us. We're here to serve them, and to have that mindset of being helpful whenever possible and being humble. And that's what this one kind of gets to. So we're here to serve, not be served. Just stay humble. And that's my code. That's the IT code, and that's how I build the foundation for my team. And hopefully that's helpful for you guys when you're building your foundation. All right, next up I want to talk about the interior. Working out the interior of your team is to figure out how you can motivate your team and to encourage them and to build them up. And when I think about motivation, I always think back to money. Money is the first thing that pops in, and money is a motivator, absolutely. But money is not the only motivator, and it's not the most important motivator. Good teams and good companies typically pay their employees enough so that money's not really the sole motivator. Like right now, when I think about where I'm at in my career and where many senior and mid-level people are in their career, getting an extra 10% is not enough to make them leave the company and move somewhere else. But having a bad job and having frustrating work and work that you're not proud of and work that doesn't give you purpose, to go somewhere where you can have that, then yeah, 10% would be easily enough to make that jump. So pay people enough so that money's not on the table. Next up, let's talk about rewards when it comes to motivation. And you can choose to reward people, with positive or bad behavior. We call that typically the sticks and carrots when we're talking about psychology and if-then kind of rewards. And if anybody's worked in software development, you're familiar with if-then, if-else. And that kind of same process can come out with rewards. If you do this, then I'll give you this reward. And if you don't do this, then you get this punishment. And one example that I had was from a daycare, and I think this is a really cool one because I have 3 kids, and kids have gone to daycare, and daycare is very expensive. But not only that, it's also a hassle. You have to take your kids and drop them off. So daycare is closed. Sometimes you're a little late picking them up, or if you have a meeting and it runs over, yada, yada, yada. Well, the daycare doesn't like to stay after. They want you to pick up your kids on time. And my daycare has a rule that 6 o'clock is when you pick up your kids. And if you're later than 6 o'clock too many times in a row, you get in trouble, right? But what is the punishment for being late? Well, let's talk about that in just a minute. Let's talk about this example, this experiment that this company did in Israel. But the same thing could be true in the United States. What they did is they said the closing time is at, let's say, 6 o'clock. So we're going to close the daycare at 6 o'clock. Anytime a parent is later than 6 o'clock, they're going to be charged a fine of $10 for every 10 minutes they're late. So what do you think happened? Do you think more people were late or less people were late once they instituted this fine? Well, it all depends on what the fine was before. Well, let me tell you that. There was no fine before. Before this fine was instituted, if you came up late, you just went to this room where they put all the late kids with 1 or 2 teachers that had to stay after, and you could just look in that teacher's face and see how disappointed they were that you were late. So the punishment was actually not a fine. It was shame. It was fear. It was kind of like, I made this teacher have to work late because I'm a bad parent, blah, blah, blah. I got to pick up my kid. That's kind of how you felt. Well, because of this fine, they kind of made it okay. So if you actually look at the numbers of this results, was that after the introduction of the fine was observed a steady increase of the number of parents coming late, and the rate finally settled at a level that was twice as high as the initial level of parents coming late. So what they did is by charging this fine is they made it okay. They made it to where you just pay a little bit more and you get more service. And it's no longer a concept of shame or fear. It's more of like, oh, yeah, I'll pay more for more time. And that's what they did. So it actually kind of worked in reverse. And we got to think about that when we're working on building our interior of our team, is how we are motivating our team. Is giving them a reward to do something the right thing to do? Well, I have 3 kids, and I know if I ever pay my kids to take out the garbage, then they'll never take it out for free. They need to understand that's just part of life. That's part of working on this team, is we do this together. We work together. We will do our chores. If you live in this house, you will do these chores. And the same thing is true with your team. Don't give them rewards for doing their what should be their normal job. By doing that, you're going to instill this idea that it's okay not to do your normal job. So realize that when you're building your interior. Another thing you can do to help build your interior, and something that I've done with my teams in the past, is serve together. Teams that volunteer together and work together and do things outside of their normal day-to-day life that have purpose and generate purpose is really important. At my last company, we actually did a habitat build for an entire week. And I didn't make my team take PTO or take off work. We just did it. And what I found out later is that my team actually worked in the evenings to make sure that things got done and they kept ahead of their projects. Even though I was fully anticipating having to go back to the business and saying, yeah, we're late because of my fault, because of something I did. I required my team or encouraged my team to do this habitat build together. But my team, without me knowing it, worked to get the things done so that we weren't late coming into the project. Another thing we did is we actually served together during our lunch breaks. So we started doing it once a quarter, and we ended up moving it to once a month, where we would spend our lunch going to soup kitchens and serving, or going to an orphanage, and we would pressure wash their toys. We would do things during lunch in order to serve together as a team. And it started out as something that I mandated to help build team building and cohesiveness. But after a few quarters of us doing it, I thought, well, I don't know if it's working or not. I mean, the team seems to be getting along just fine. I don't really have time to book one of these things this quarter, so I kind of let it go. And then people on my team stepped up and they started doing it themselves. And they started coming to me and said, hey, is it okay if I invite the whole team to do this thing during lunch? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And they turned in from quarterly to monthly because the team wanted to do that. Right? And maybe that's not your thing, and that's okay. Another thing you can do is what we did with my team just a few weeks ago is we had a pizza planning party. But what we did is we brought in classic Sega Genesis, the Super Nintendo Classic, and the Nintendo Classic, and the Atari Flashback. Hooked them all up to TVs and projectors, and we played video games, and we hung out for 2 or 3 hours playing video games, socializing, talking about projects we were going to work on next year, and eating pizza, and just had a good time. And surprisingly, some of the people that I didn't think would come because they're not quite as social, they actually got along and enjoyed this because it was something different. It was something more up their alley, like video games, classic games that brought them back to their youth and thinking about the way things used to be. And they were able to converse, say, oh, I remember that game. This guy's like, oh, I had that game too. And now they have something in common and they can talk together and build that teamwork. So that's another way that you can work on the interior. All right. Next up is refinements. So again, we did foundation, interior. Now we're working on refinements. And refinements are kind of the small details that aren't necessary to get the job done, but they'll help make the people that are on your team feel better about the work they're doing. And the number one thing, and really the main thing I want to talk about when it comes to refinement, is purpose. Purpose. Creating a purpose. And the example that I like to use with purpose is a guy named Doug Dietz. And Doug Dietz designed medical equipment, specifically MRI machines, and he created this great MRI machine, put it out there. And if any of you guys are like me, you're prone to injuries because either you're clumsy or not as athletic as you think you are, like I am, and you might hurt yourself. And I've torn my ACL. I've injured myself many times and had a couple of MRIs. And when you go to an MRI machine, you sit in this little thing that looks like a donut, and you kind of roll into it. It's a little bit noisy, loud. You have that hospital smell. Everything is kind of like a beige or white. It's kind of scary. It's not a conducive for enjoyable experience. Okay, but Doug created this new MRI machine. He wanted to go see it, in action. Take a field trip. So he went to take a field trip to a hospital. And it happened to be a pediatric hospital. And when he got there, he started looking at this machine, and he noticed that when the kids came in, they freaked out. I mean, they went nuts. They're like, what is going on? They were crying and screaming. And more than 50% of the patients had to be sedated in order to go through this machine because they were scared of it. Because he didn't think about the fact that kids were going to be going in here. So he went back to the drawing board, took this information that he got from taking a field trip to figure out how he could generate some purpose and some things that would make the experience better for these kids. So he painted the machines to make them look, like different scenes, like maybe the scene of a captain ship or pirate ship, or maybe a space shuttle, or maybe a beach scene, maybe an underwater theme. He took different themes and painted these things, had the rooms decorated with new wallpaper so the rooms were colorful and fit the vibe. He had music playing, so there'd be music in there, not just the da-da-da-da-da sound of the MRI machine, but some kind of like music that made perfect harmony with the pictures that were there. And even in some of the rooms, they had scents and odor, so that the kid would go there and smell the beach, if they were in the ocean scene, which was kind of a cool thing. The kids were in there, and what they found was that the number of people that needed to be sedated dropped by 30%. And kids were actually more excited. And during one of Doug's return field trips, after they had made these changes to the machine, one of the kids said, "Daddy, Mommy, that was exciting. I love doing that. Can we go back?" And it's kind of like a heartwarming moment for Doug, because his work had purpose. You realize that the position that these parents and kids are in when they come into this. Most of the time when a kid's getting an MRI, they're hurt, they're injured. The parents, they're uncertain. They don't know if their kid needs surgery. They don't know if their kid has a disease, or what's going on. So usually the parents are kind of freaking out, the kids are freaking out, and now the kid doesn't want to go through this because he's screaming and crying, and that just increases the stress on the parent. And now when you go to something and the kid actually enjoys it, they're not scared of it anymore. It puts so much relief on the parents, so they can just get past this and they focus on what the next steps are. What is the diagnosis? What is the work we have to do to get past this? We're not focusing on the stress of actually just getting the MRI done. So it's kind of a cool thing that he did, and that's one of the ways that you can develop purpose when it comes to your team. Another example, and this is just one that I'll talk about with my team, I took Doug's idea and I made my team take a field trip because we had a request to move a closed ticket button from the top of a mobile app or from the bottom of the mobile app screen to the top of the mobile app screen. I thought it seemed silly and stupid to do this because, usually you assume that the technician will open up the ticket, they'll read the notes, they'll scroll down to the bottom, they'll type in their notes, and then they'll close the ticket, right? Well, what we found out when we did our field trips is that's not how the team used this form. They would do that, but they would save it but not close the ticket usually. And they would wait till the end of the day to make sure that the customer didn't call back and say there was a problem or something like that. And then they would reopen all those tickets, and the technician would scroll through them on the bottom of their phone, and get to the bottom and then just close them one at a time. So we rethunked this process after finding out this by the field trip, and we're able to rapidly increase the ability so they could close multiple tickets at once and move the buttons, made a copy of the buttons. The buttons is at the top and the bottom, so they could close it at any time. And this saved probably about 4 or 5 minutes, which may not seem that much for the technicians at the end of their day. But we were able to describe this to the team to give them purpose, not just that we were making things a little bit easier for the techs, but that these technicians were doing this when they were getting ready to leave for the day to spend time with their families, to take their kids to soccer, to go to baseball practice, to do something that was more family-oriented or more enjoyable for that technician. And we're giving them 5 or 6 minutes of time to leave to spend with their families versus staying at work and doing things that were unnecessary. And when you change the phrasing of that and redid it so you have purpose to what you're working on, the team actually were more encouraged to work on this than they were before. All right. And another thing when it comes to refinements is to think about kind of the biology that goes through someone when it gets into leadership. And I want to talk briefly about the chemicals in your brain. And I call this the biology of leadership kind of talk. And I had an episode about this probably 2 or 3 years ago where it was just focused on this one part. But it's EDSO, okay? It's endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. And endorphins are that chemical that you get in your brain whenever you work hard. So like if you go for a run, you get some endorphins, you feel good, right? That's the runner's high. That's the thing that you get whenever you achieve something. And this chemical is thought to be in our brain because, as humans, we had to go find food. And if you went out there and you had the rush of chasing down a buffalo, let's say, and hunting it down and getting the meat, you would want to go do that again, right? And you wouldn't wait until you were starving to go do that because you would have that endorphin rush and you feel good and you want to do that again. So that's the idea of endorphins. The next chemical is dopamine. And dopamine is that feeling we get whenever we check something off our to-do list. And I'm a to-do list junkie, even though I found out to-do lists really aren't the best way of doing things. And you can check back the episode, one of our other episodes where I talk about time management, where we go into putting things on a calendar versus putting them on a to-do list. But I like to-do lists, so I still put things on the to-do list and I check them off. I put all my groceries on the to-do list. And sometimes when I'm at the grocery store, I'll see something that's not on my list. I'll add it to the list just so I can check it off again, because it makes me feel good, right? Because that dopamine rush, I feel good. And the thought is that dopamine is in our body so that we want to do things that feel good, and we'll be encouraged to do that. So maybe gathering food was something that felt good, so we'd go get that food, and we'd wait. We wouldn't wait till we were starving to go do that. We'd do it when we had the energy to do it because it felt good and we got that dopamine hit. And the other two, and those two, endorphins and dopamine, you can kind of do on yourself, right? You can go for a run, you can do something that's on your to-do list, and you'll get those two chemicals. But the next two chemicals, serotonin and oxytocin, don't work that way. They kind of work in the way that you have to have someone else, right? And serotonin is that pride chemical. It's the chemical that if you achieve something and people are proud of you, you get a rush of serotonin. Like if you graduate from college with a degree and you walk across that stage, you get that rush of serotonin. And the really cool part about that is the people that helped you get there, and the people that are proud of you, they also get a rush. So whenever your kid goes across the stage and you're proud of them for graduating, you get that same rush of serotonin that they get. And it kind of generates a bond between mentor and mentee, parent, child, coach, player, and boss, employee. So one of the things we need to do as leaders is to instill that coach, player mindset, or that mentor, mentee mindset with our team, so that we can generate those chemicals to encourage us to achieve more and to do more. And serotonin is the way to do that. And the next chemical is oxytocin. And oxytocin is a chemical that helps us when it comes to love. It's considered the love chemical. You get oxytocin when you shake hands with someone, or your physical contact. You also get it when you do something kind for one another. So if you go out of your way to do something to help someone else out, you both get that rush of oxytocin. And most likely, if you do help someone out by going out of your way and helping someone, that person will probably help someone out too. It's kind of like that chain reaction of, that felt good when that person helped me out. I want to pay it forward, and I want to help someone else out. And so I can feel good about that, and then they can feel good too. And it starts this chain reaction that kind of moves forward. And with your team, if you instill that by being a leader that goes out and does the work that the other team members don't want to do, or help someone out when it's not your job to help them out, you can instill that and move forward, and they will pay it forward as well. And it'll generate that culture in that team of just of helping each other and having each other's back, like I had in my foundation talk. But we'll do it with refinements and move it even further. Okay. There's one more chemical that's not part of EDSO, but it is in your brain, and I want to talk about it too. It's cortisol. It's the stress chemical, as we call it, and it's that chemical that gives you that fight or flight type syndrome. And our bodies aren't made to always have cortisol in them. It's kind of one of those things that's really helpful whenever there's a heightened sense of fear, because it causes some of the energy that's used for day-to-day, digestion of food, repair of damaged cells, to be used for the, improving our reaction time, and helping us out whenever we're like being attacked by something, or there's some imminent threat. And if we are the type of leaders that put pressure on our teams and let our teams know that, hey, you may get fired, or something bad may happen if you don't achieve something, we're giving them that threat when it's unnecessary. And many times that causes people to get into a self-preservation mode. So they think more about how they can preserve themselves versus taking the risk to benefit the team. And we need to make sure that we don't give people too much cortisol, so that they aren't in that self-preservation mode. They're more going to benefiting the team versus themselves. Okay, and that's refinements. So we've covered foundation, interior, and refinements. I want to talk last about exterior. And exterior is one that, when you're building a house, it's the second thing you do. It's extremely important to get that exterior placed correctly. When you're building a great team, it's not as important to do this. It's the last thing on our list. And the reason why is because once you've got your good foundation laid forth, you've spent time working on the interior of all of your people, and you refine by generating purpose and making your team a place where people want to be a part of, and they want to work there. They feel more like they're bonded to one another. Then You don't have to do a whole lot on the outside because it kind of shines through. But there are some things you can do as a leader to improve the exterior of your team. One is to give credit to to individuals and to the team. So don't just always take credit as the team. Feel free to do that, but also give credit to individuals. When someone says, wow, your IT team did a great job of doing this, say, yeah, so-and-so, Billy Bob did a great job of making sure this went off well, and let people know that you have people on your team that are excellent. All right, but never, ever, ever blame an individual. Don't ever say Billy Bob was the reason why this didn't work well. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I had a problem with this and this and this, say, that's my fault. We'll make sure this is taken care of, and we're not going to blame anybody. We'll say, yeah, as a team, we dropped the ball here. We'll take care of it. And another thing that I've done, and I've been doing this for a while now, is creating annual reports. So it's kind of like a list of things that we've done well as a team this year, accomplishments that we've made. And some of those are interesting, like no turnover for X number of months or years. We've increased the number of systems we support, or we reduced budget by X number of dollars, or we had this many help desk tickets that we resolved on first call. Whatever the numbers are that we're proud of, we talk about those metrics and we put them in there and show your team what that annual report is. You don't have to show it to everybody. You don't have to show it to the public, but your team needs to know about it because it's one of those things that they're proud of. But one of the things I do with my annual report is I let my boss see it, and I let my boss's boss see it. Our C-level executives see that. So they kind of know what we're doing as a team. And things shine through. And I want to talk a little bit about one stat with my team that I think is super awesome, is that we're getting recognized from the outside. And when you get that, you get recognition from the outside, whether it's whatever your company has. Maybe they have Employee of the Month. Maybe they have the Getting Stuff Done Award, or whatever it is that your company does. Whenever that happens and people on your team get recognized by not being nominated from someone from your team, but being nominated from someone outside of your team, it makes a big difference, and it's a big deal. And it's showing you that you did set the foundation. You did have good interior, and you have made refinements, and now the exterior is shining through. The exterior is a result of the other three. It's not something you go out and try to do, and if you try to do it first, you're going to fail. You have to get the other three done first, right? You have to build that foundation, do the interior, create the refinements, and then the exterior will shine through. And before you get discouraged that this seems like a lot you have to do, realize that it's a process. It's not a project. It's a continuous process. You'll always have to continue to do this. The code talk that I mentioned earlier with the foundation, I go up over that with my team every year. We go up over what is our code. And it's a reminder that has to be done. I used to do it quarterly, and I haven't had a whole lot of turnover, so I haven't had to continually reiterate it, but it's still something I remind the team about. And we still go through it. And I've done that for years, and we'll continue to do that. But I want to tell you one last story as we end this podcast episode, and that's this idea about Picasso. You guys know who Picasso is? You probably do. He painted stuff and drew pictures. He was an artist, right? Well, Picasso was one of the few artists. You think about historical famous artists. He was one of the few ones that was kind of famous during his day. A lot of famous artists, they're dead and then their work becomes famous. Well, he was famous during his day and he knew it. So he would go to bars, and a lot of times he would, draw a little picture or doodle something on a napkin and use that to pay his bar tab and move on. Well, he had a fan that came up to him and said, Picasso, I'm such a big fan. I love your work. And, gave him a piece of paper for him to sign something. He said, can you just doodle something or sign your name and draw something for me? He said, sure. So he spent about 15 seconds to draw this little a picture. I don't know what it could be. It could be a picture of a dog or cat or whatever it is. Drew this little picture in 15 seconds and started to hand it to the person and then pulled it back and says, that'll be $10,000. And the person said, $10,000? It took you 15 seconds. And he said, no, ma'am. That took me 40 years to learn how to do that in 15 seconds. And the idea is we as leaders need to realize that some things that seem easy for others didn't come easy. They spent a lot of time to develop it so that it does seem easy. And when you see other people that seem to be great leaders and they seem to be able to take everything and just manage very well, that's not always natural. Sometimes there's a lot of work that goes behind that. And when you look at companies and you say, oh, well, they were an overnight success, people don't realize that there was 10 years of work before they became that overnight success. And many times that's the same thing when it comes to building a great team. It's not just a great team overnight. It takes years of work and lots of effort to generate the skills and knowledge necessary to build that great team. So I hope this is helpful, and if so, please hit me up on Twitter or leave a rating and review and share this episode with your friends. This is one of the rare solo shows that I do, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I do. I like to talk about this stuff. I like to come up with these ideas and write this information up. It's helpful for me because it reminds me of some of the things that I need to work on that I'm not working on, and I hope it's helpful for you guys as well. Anyway, have a great weekend. I enjoyed sharing this with you. Hopefully you guys did too, and you share it with your friends. Thanks so much.